Hello and welcome for the Foodeshow. Today we have Chula Mfala, and Chula is working with in the Grow Africa program within the Auda Nepad, which is the development agency that is taking care of the African Union. Thank you, Chula, for accepting our invite, and he will talk to us about the free trade agreement that is already in 2021. Chula, it's up to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, we're entering a very exciting time within Africa, where we now have the African Continental Free Trade Area that is aimed at boosting trade among African countries. At the moment, inter-Africa trade is very, very low. I think most countries trading among themselves is less than 20%. And that has got many other connotations behind it, and in terms of why this is happening. Apart from the trade barriers, there are some non-trade barrier issues. There's also cost-related issues and also issues around infrastructure. So in a case like East Africa, where Grow Africa has done a study on the potato value chain, looking at all the countries within that region producing potatoes, it's clear that certain countries have got lower production costs than others, and therefore that gives them a comparative advantage. However, most of that processing capacity and where the market for potatoes is in Kenya. Kenya itself has got higher production costs, say, compared to Malawi. However, there is this challenge of how then do you move this produce from one country to the other and making it land in a cost-effective manner, considering that we have a lot of challenges around the infrastructure. So the regional value chain development that Grow Africa is also talking about and getting into, from rice to in West Africa to potatoes in East Africa, that is also meant to teeter some of the challenges around that. Indeed, it is much, much cheaper to import something from Asia and having it land in Africa compared to even producing it from a neighboring country because of the whole issue around costs. So African Union Development Agency has got programs around infrastructure, and now it's really about trying to see how the infrastructure programs, the trade-related programs, the economic integration programs, as well as programs such as Grow Africa, which is looking at development of value chains across countries and regions, how then we can work together to ensure that we are able to compete price-wise with some of the imports that we're getting from other countries. So apart from imports, there's also a whole issue of volumes as well within the value chain. So without mentioning any names or in terms of companies, you tend to find that while there is a program to look at, say, sourcing in Africa, a lot of countries in Africa cannot be able to source the volumes at the right price for the companies, and it becomes much cheaper for them once it moves. If it goes to procurement, the procurement department just looks at the costs, look at the returns on the investments, and how the cash flow is going to be affected. So it comes cheaper for maybe a company producing fruit juices to import mangoes from India than trying to source them within Africa. So aggregation systems, which is really for me part of infrastructure, is important. Apart from also the logistics around that, which also need to be developed. So we have issues around infrastructure, we have issues around developing the logistics themselves, and be able to create the volumes that are needed so that those who are involved in the logistics can be able to justify the use of the equipment in terms of, say, landing in a country like Zambia to collect huge volumes of, say, fruit juices to take to maybe South Africa as an example for processing. So those are the issues, and what's going to happen with the Continental Free Trade Area, because the opportunities are going to be created. The assumption being made from our side is that the private sector, governments, development agencies will then come in to be able to exploit these opportunities that arise from these initiatives.
So to my understanding, there's it's already in place, the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and it covers 53 countries out of the 55. How soon can we start actually moving, and what's the advantages of trading within the African continent?
So yes, you're right. There are a lot of countries that have rectified the free trade agreements with the threshold that has been attained. So it is in effect. What is happening, what has happened is that in terms of sheer numbers, this is probably the largest economic zone that has been created on Earth. And that has created a huge market for the participants within that. So in terms of moving volumes, there is this need to start looking at regional value chains and trying to see then how do we work in with the comparative advantages of the different countries. And the impacts that is going to have is that for a smallholder farmer producing tomatoes in West Africa, in Burkina Faso as an example, there is a huge market in Nigeria because Nigeria imports several billions of tomato paste from China. So if we're able to add value for a country like Burkina Faso in terms of bringing down the cost, and there's a huge market in Nigeria, that then will be able to create those kinds of benefits within that. An example that I can also give you, this is something practical that I did a few years ago, is to help companies in Zambia to export honey into South Africa. Now, some of these companies were exporting honey into the EU, and looking at just the logistics of doing that, moving honey from the honey producing areas in Zambia, getting them to the borders and getting them to Namibia, to Windhoek, then putting that on a ship for it to be able to land in Hamburg, in Germany. It was logistically, it was a nightmare. And yet there was a market 2,000 kilometers away where you could be able to put your produce on a truck, and within 36 to 48 hours, it's being offloaded. Price-wise, it was more or less the same. So it's possible that this can be done, assuming that we are able to also develop the markets to create the off-take markets. Logistically, that could also be done, and also to help that the different countries start looking at issues on border control, issues around food safety, non-tariff barriers, if it's phytosanitary and sanitary standards, and just be able to optimize that and harmonize that so that then the movement of goods is much easier.
My last question, and we'll end with this, is how big is the African market in terms of consumers? How do you see the growth in 2030? And as well as what diversity do we have in products? If you can talk about the landscape, that would be great for people that are with us at the Foodeshow from Africa and don't know the continent that well.
Okay, I'll spin it off in this way. The estimates from the African Development Bank are somewhere around Africa and the import bill alone growing to somewhere around $110 billion by 2025, if I'm not mistaken. If we can just spin that around where the import bill has been reduced or can be reduced even by 50% by 2025, it means that there is close to $60 billion of money circulating within the African continent. Now, money which should have left. Now that money is going to be within the African continent, and that already creates a huge market for companies and commodities producers, processors on the African continent. So that's just one way of looking at it, that a reduction in the import bill will automatically kind of produce a market size of 60 billion if we're able to just reduce that by 50%. by 2025. There is a lot of diversity in an African continent, both in terms of diets. There's a lot of uptake of new foods, particularly related to health, superfoods as well. And also there's just a huge curiosity. I mean, for someone like myself who travels across the African continent, every time I go into a different country, I'm looking at what they're producing, and I find that it's very different from one country to the other and from region to region. So if we're able now to also see how then we can be able to promote the different diets and the different foods across the African space. If you look at, say, jollof rice in West Africa and how can it be, say, found in Southern Africa, what is in Southern Africa can then be also easily accessible in West Africa and East Africa. That will also create a different market and different dynamics around food processing and the logistics. So the market is huge, and I've just answered it clearly from the perspective of import substitution or import reduction. But I think there is also quite a lot of benefits that can be gained just by exposing other African countries to diets which are available in other African countries. So that, again, would be a huge, huge market that can be developed simply because we are exposing ourselves to different diets which are available in different countries.
Thank you, Chola, for all your input. I do just as a reminder that we have with us Auda, which is African Women for Agriculture and Art, that is representing 22,000 women in the agribusiness within different areas, and they are looking for partners for manufacturing to access actually African markets and using the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Thank you, Auda Nepad, for being a partner, and hopefully people can connect with you directly and ask you questions.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. As Grafrica, we are available to partner with different organizations. Our website is grafrica.com, so you'll be able to get our contacts from there and just give us the investment opportunities, and then see how we can structure some of these value chains to the benefit of both ourselves, the markets, the producers, as well as the processors. Thank you very much.